Hello, hello everyone. Thank you for popping in today to watch me craft and share a project from my Coffee and Cards online Facebook event. I am so happy you joined me today. If you have been with me before, welcome back. If you haven't, I am so happy you have popped on and joined in today. I go live every Monday at 10 a.m. That's Australian Eastern Time. I am located in the same time zone as Melbourne, Australia. So if you're not quite sure where that is, just Google that on the map and you can convert to your own time zone. So today I am going to create a fun box type project that you can create using soft succulent, evening evergreen, and Sahara sand ink. I have chosen to use, let me pull this out of the way. I've chosen the Peaceful Deer stamp set along with the coordinating punch. So that's my main focus for my project, but I needed something extra. So I have also pulled in the Christmas season stamp set. And in this one, all I'm going to be using is this fun little flowery shape. You may have the old sprig punch. You may have other die cut shapes that you have used at home that maybe you cut out and then you didn't use. So we need a piece of cardstock. Now I will post the metric measurements as well, but excuse me, just for now, let me get my measurements so they're right in front of me. This particular piece of cardstock is 6 inches wide by 8.5 inches long. Okay, so that is how big the paper is. Let me grab that out of the way. Now you will need a piece of, actually 2 pieces of designer series paper. These are cut at 3 3/4 inch by 3 3/4, so they're just a square. And you will need 2 of the strips that are cut at 3 3/4 inch by 7/8 inch, so a little bit skinnier. For my project, I went ahead and chose the layering circles. Now I'm going to show you which ones I used, and I also have a scrap of basic white. So let me show you what size circles fits on at, this particular project that we're going to create. These are my most often used dies. In fact, I ordered myself a new set, so I have 2 to cut for classes. So for this particular project, I'm going to count from the middle out. So 1, 2, 3. I've used the 3rd largest circle. And then 1, 2, 3, I've used the 3rd largest scalloped circle. And when I cut those out, I cut 1 out of basic white and 1 out of early espresso. But if you wanted this piece to have more of an edge, then you could just go up a size for that scalloped bit. Seriously, these are my most often used products. So what I'm going to do is we are going to stamp before we even do anything else, and I'm going to get all of the elements put together for our project. So you are going to want to stay with me until the end so that you can see exactly what this project looks like. All right, so I'm going to grab my Sahara sand ink. Now this one will need a cushion. So let me grab my piercing mat, only because I have found some photopolymer stamps you can stamp no worries without having a mat under them, but because this little deer has some fine images, I find that you really need to stamp on a mat. And I'm going to stamp him very close to the bottom so that I can punch that out. There we go. So there's our little deer. So let me get that out of the way, and I am done with my Sahara sand ink. And while I'm stamping, I'm going to go ahead and take soft succulent, and I am going to stamp 2 of those pretty little, I don't know what you call these, little leaf images, I guess. So I'll stamp 2 of those. I'm just trying to get some of these things out of the way so that I don't have to pull these back in. I love these. Now, if you don't have any of these products and you would like them, reach out to me and we will get those ordered for you. All right, so I'm going to take the Merry Christmas out of the stamp set, and I am just going to stamp that down in this corner. And I'm actually going to cut that. It looks like it's a little crooked, so let me see if I can fix that. Stamp that again. Much better. Okay. So while I have my ink out, I am going to just grab I might just grab a Post-it note since I have it nice and handy. Set that out of the way. And while I'm inking, I want to put some trees. So I have grabbed one of the evergreen trees. And once again, I'm going to use that evergreen early evening, what's it called? Evening evergreen. And I'm going to get some nice evergreens popped up on here. Now, when you stamp off, you do need to re-ink it for this one. Otherwise, you will get the outside circle from your stamp. Okay, so I'm just going to stamp a couple of those like that. Perfect. And then I will set that aside and I am finished. And I'm going to put that like that. So let's see, actually, let's do this first. So I'm going to pop up my trees on top of, let me get this out of the way. I make such a mess, oh my gosh. All right, so let me pop this up just like that. I'm just trying to get some of this element finished and out of the way before we actually make the box that it's going to go on. So let me punch this little reindeer out. I love punches. They make things so simple and so easy. So I'm just going to line that up in there. Give that a bit of a punch. And get that out of the way because I won't need that again. Let me put that somewhere where it won't tip over and make a huge clank. And while I have this down, I'm just going to add a couple dimensionals behind there. Okay. With my Merry Christmas, now if you had a sentiment that had curves, you could cut that out. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply snip that with my paper snips. And just cut up both sides. And just leave a nice little straight white border. And I might cut that a little bit more. There we go. And while I have that there, I have some of my strip. It's like dimensionals, only it comes in a strip. And I'm going to cut a chunk of that off, and then I can just put that right on the back. Made it just a little bit too long. Let me cut that off. There we go. And I will set that there. And then I am going to disappear for a minute. I'm going to go cut those two shapes out. So we know that the seasonal labels dies match the Christmas season stamp set. So I'm going to use the die to cut that out. If you don't have the dies, you could just hand fussy cut that. So I will be back in a moment with those cut out. All right, I have returned and I have these bits cut out. So let's go ahead and assemble them and get this particular piece ready for my project. So I think for this one, I am going to grab some glue dots as well. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the backings from that cute reindeer and pop that up onto my stamped circle. And most of this is actually going to get covered up. Now I probably am going to trim this off just a little bit so it fits down a little bit closer. And I'm going to use a glue dot to attach that underneath. Now this is my tip of the day, is I always use a little piece of ribbon just to hold my extra paper out of the way. Let's grab that one. So I'm just going to tuck that one underneath the reindeer body. Give that a push. Grab my second one. Do the same thing. Just push that underneath. Just like that. I might get that a little bit closer. There we go. And then I'll just peel off the backing of that strip. And I'm going to put that, oh, didn't want that quite that long. Let me cut some of that off. There we go. I just didn't want any sticky sticking off the reindeer. Beautiful. Something just like that. Now I am going to bring in the beautiful, I love this ribbon. This is the open weave ribbon, and this is the evening evergreen. So I'm going to show you how I make a bow. I actually don't cut my ribbon off of the spool because it's wasteful. So what I did is I just roll some out and I make a loop, wrap my ribbon around the whole loop I just made, and then I'm going to tuck this piece into that bow without bending it. Whoops, that's going to slide. There we go. Whoops, let's start that one again. Loop, wrap, tuck. I don't want to twist any of my ribbon. And that's the secret to getting ribbons that lay flat. Okay, so now I can just get that down to the size I want. Just like that. And I'm going to cut that with my good ribbon, with my good scissors. And then you're not really wasting a whole lot. You're only going to cut off and waste that little bit of ribbon. And I am going to grab another glue dot. And this time I'm also going to grab my liquid glue and put just a little drop right in there. So the glue dot will initially hold the ribbon in place, and then when the glue dries, that is going to hold it as well. There we go. So I'm just going to set that. So there's our little element. I'm going to set that aside to dry, and you could add other things if you so choose to do so. All right, what I want you to do now is I want you to grab your piece of cardstock. You will need your paper trimmer this time. And you want to use the scoring blade. Now, personally, I have placed the scoring blade at the top of my paper trimmer. And then this is my cutting blade. And we know that with the new paper trimmer, you can actually slide that out of the way. So make sure that you are not cutting your paper. So we are going to slide that into our 1 inch mark. 1 inch. Which is actually 2.5 centimeters, and we are going to score. Now make sure that your paper is going this up and down mark, okay? Oops, I have another one. And so then I'm just going to flip it around and score it at 1 inch as well. Or if you could do 1 inch and then slide it at 5, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's your 1 inch or your 2.5 centimeter mark. Now I'm going to spin it, and this time I'm going to need to take out the arm on my paper trimmer. This is the absolute easiest box because it has so few scoring marks. So for the first score mark, I'm going to go to 4 inches. Now that is 10.2 centimeters if you're using metric. And I'm going to slide it over to 8 inches. Which is 20.3 centimeters. Now here's the tricky part. Not tricky, it's just you have to remember to keep this little tiny score mark to the right side. So this was when I just scored it at 8 inches, okay? It left a little 1/2 inch edge, and we want to keep that to our right. So I'm going to take my paper and pull it back in. Here is our one of our first score marks that we made at the 1 inch mark. I'm going to slide that to 2 inches. And I am going to score from that 1 inch mark up. Let me line this up. And I'm not sure if you know, let me take this out. On the edge of your blade, you have this little tiny mark, and that's a little guide mark. So when you want to score just a little bit, you just need to line up this little line with the side with where your scored line is. So in this instance, this is the 1 inch mark. You do have measurements on your track as well that will help make it a little bit easier. And you just score up. And we're going to do that at, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. We're going to do that at 2 inches. We're going to slide that across at 6 inches. And what that is doing is that is making a score mark. If you looked at half of our project, it's made a score mark from that 1 inch mark up to the edge. So you're probably not going to be able to see it on camera, but I do have a little visual to show you in just a moment. So let me take the paper trimmer out of the way for a minute. So the next thing that you are going to need to do is take a ruler, and you can use your bone folder, you could use a scoring tool, whatever you have. Here is that little score mark that we just made at the 2 and the 6 inch mark. We are going to score from where that intersects down to the bottom score mark. So we have a 1 inch score mark that runs along here, and we have a 1 inch score mark that runs here, and there's those 2 little short score marks that we made. I'm going to line up. Now I know you're not going to be able to see this one. I'm going to line up my paper, and I'm going to score down to the intersecting mark. So where those score marks intersect, I am going to score. So I'm going to do 4 times. So I've made a triangle there. I'm going to come over here and make a triangle. So I'm going back to that corner. Let me go like this. You guys can't see it, but I have a little sticky note here off screen so that I know I don't go outside of the camera zone. Okay, and it's catching my ruler. All right, so we're almost done. So you're going to do 4 of these. And I'm going to show you the paper. All right, so here's what I've done. So there are your 2 little short score lines that you made. Remember, those were at 2 inches and 6 inches. I've lined my ruler up with that score mark, right, down to this intersecting score mark right here. And that is where I drew my score. And then I repeated it from here down to that corner, and then repeated it on this side. And that is how fast you're going to get those little triangle shapes. What you will need to do next is go ahead, let me get that out of the way. We are going to trim out those extra little bits that we don't need so we can make a tab. So this is your little 1/2 inch strip, and I've just cut that tab away. And I am going to do the same right there. And that is how easy, let me get these out of the way, you are going to get that nice little tab shape on the end. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut up. So you have these 3 little marks that you've made. We're going to cut very carefully up that score mark to that 1 inch line that we scored earlier. So you should have, you're going to cut 1 there. And you're going to cut 1 there. And let me just have a quick little sticky beak here. Okay, now I didn't get that one very straight, I can see. All right, so what I've done is I've made 4 little tabs on my box. See that? So now we can burnish all of these. So go ahead and burnish all of your score marks. Okay, so I've burnished everything except these triangle shapes. The easiest way I have found to burnish those is just to gently fold those back and burnish with my fingers to start with. So I'm just going to do that on all 4 of these little marks. So once I've done that, then I will just gently take my bone folder and burnish the rest of those marks. Now you do need to be careful. You don't want to burnish all the way to the ends where you don't want a scored mark. Okay. Perfect. So now that we've bone folded, you can do a couple different things. It may be easier to put your designer series paper on prior to when you assemble. So let me set this aside. We're going to come back to this in just a minute. What I want you to do is I want you to grab your 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 inch piece of designer series paper. Now 3 3/4 inches does not cut in half very easily if you were just to measure it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half like this, and I am just going to pinch it at one end. And you can see that I haven't folded all the way down. I'm going to use that mark as a guide to trim it. So I'm going to put where I folded that little bit at the top, right? Okay. I'm going to line that up with my cutting track. And the more careful you do this, the more even your shapes will look on your project, on your completed project. I am lining up the bottom right-hand side of that triangle in my scoring track. And this time I'm going to cut. So when I cut, I've cut straight up and I get a piece that looks like this, right? Alrighty. So now I'm going to take that same bit, line it back up with the scoring track, and I'm just going to swing that around like this, and I'm going to line up the left hand corner of my paper and where we originally folded the tab, and I'm going to cut. And this time it gives me that piece. So you will do that twice on both pieces of your designer series paper. And when you're done, you will have 2 sets. Okay. And then you will also have these 2 long strips. So let's bring back in our paper, our cardstock. And you will see that these line up really, really nice in those scored sections. Now these, you could use them like this, or you could also flip them over if you wanted a different pattern and do them like that. I'm going to leave mine going the same direction on both sides. And I recommend that you actually use your multi-purpose glue and go ahead and glue those down into your scored sections, and then your 2 strips will get glued down like that. So I'm going to glue mine and I will come back in a minute. Okay, so I have adhered down all of my pieces of designer series paper onto my scored and cut cardstock base. I will say that I have obviously cut some not as carefully as others. So a good trick of the trade is to make sure that you are very, very, very even as you cut. Once you are done cutting on this little tab piece, we are going to cut tear and tape, or you could choose to glue it if you wanted. I'm going to go ahead and take some of my tear tape. I'm making sure that it is as close to that scored line on that tab as possible without going over. Okay. And then I am just going to cut that with my snips. Just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and burnish that. You can use your finger, you could use your bone folder. I'm going to show you the neatest trick that I have since learned. And if you do not have one of these take a pick tools, you are going to want one. So many times we sit there and we pick and pick and pick and try to get the end. If you take the flat edge of your take a pick tool, slide it underneath in the center, and then lift, it will pull off and lift off that whole piece of backing. So I'm just going to fold that over, and I'm going to bring over the other side of my box, and it should line up perfectly. Okay. And then I'm just going to burnish that with my bone folder. Make sure that's nice and adhered shut. And you're going to see that this one end automatically wants to close, right? That's going to be the top of our box. Now to do the bottom, so you can see it kind of sits like a diamond shape, right? We want to fold that into a square. Okay, so I'm going to fold that, just kind of pop that into a square shape. When I was doing this on my coffee and cards class, so remember coffee and cards is done live every Monday at 10 o'clock, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so Melbourne time zone. You're going to see that these two, there's nothing for those two attached to. And we want these two to come down and form a nice square for our box. So what I realized would work the best is I'm going to take a glue dot. Let's see, where did I put those? Typically, I like to glue the bottom of my boxes. So I'm going to take a glue dot. I'm going to get one ready. Get one ready here. And I know that I want my box to come over like this. So I'm going to take a glue dot and just put one. So I'm going to call this the north. So I'm going to put one on north. And I am going to pull that back together. I'm not going to push it down. And I'm going to put one on the south. Okay, so on the south flap, the bottom flap of this little creation. Whoops. All right. Because we know when we put, this glue dot is being stubborn. Well, that's all right. We don't really need him. So we know that these glue dots are going to hold these flaps down when I add my glue. So here's my north and south with my glue dots. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on my east and west little rectangles of the bottom of my box. So I don't want so much glue that it's going to ooze out, because I'm going to have to hold this box together. And that's why we've added a glue dot, because that glue dot will grab that paper. So I'm holding it in a square shape. And I'm just massaging a little bit, okay, where I want that box to go. And I'm just pushing down. Whoops. Let me open up my box. This is probably the trickiest part of the whole thing. So I'm just going to hold that like that. You can take your bone folder, okay? You could take your take a pick tool. So here I have the end on. You could take a clear block. And if you have a really small hand, you could get your hand in there, okay? Whatever it takes to get that to hold down and adhere to your box bottom. And then I'm just pushing down. And that, because I've glued it, and I have those two glue dots to help hold it, now that I've squished it, it will hold that together. Now I am going to tell you, so I didn't do this earlier, if you don't want to see it, or if you make a mistake and you have a gap on the bottom of your box, you could cut a 1 7/8 by 1 7/8 square of designer series paper. And I'm just going to add some of my glue. Okay, so some of you don't like to see the bottoms. This would be a great way to hide it, okay? And you would be able to put that on the bottom of your project, just like that. And the glue allows you a little bit of time to make sure you have it nice and square. And then that will cover if that doesn't totally hide, if your box bottom doesn't totally join. Okay, look at that. All right, and then all you need to do is take your element. Now you could choose to use dimensionals, you could use glue, whatever you want. I'm going to use dimensionals. Now this time I'm going to stick them down the center because I don't know where that is going to come out. I'm just going to peel those off while I have it in my hand. And I'm going to adhere that down onto my box. Just like that. And you have a self-closing box, and it's actually quite large. It's a perfect box for gifting. Love it. Okay. So that's our creation for today. Now hang with me and I will place in all of the score marks so you can see exactly what we've done score-wise, so you can create this at home. So hold tight. Let me put that out of the way. And when you do that, you're going to end up with this cute box. Now, just as an aside, don't be afraid to change up. So you can see here, I've actually turned my designer series paper over. This is the back of that one. And it gives it a totally different look. So have fun creating. I appreciate you tuning in. Hop on over and join our private Facebook group, PJ's Coffee and Cards, and post what you make. I would love to see it. Have a great day. Hope to see you next Monday. Bye, you guys.